Do you want to become a full-stack web developer in 2023? The demand for programmers continues to rise even through the pandemic. If you're wondering if it's too late for you to get started, no, it's not too late. So let me show you what you need to do. You've probably seen roadmaps like these, and I've created one before as well. These are crazy spaghetti diagrams of hundreds of technologies, and these are packed full of info, but mostly overwhelm and confuse people. In this video, I'll be sticking to a roadmap of the core essentials that you need to learn in order to become a full-stack web developer in 2023. Then after that, I'll talk about a few technologies that are optional, extracurricular, that you might want to look into after you've learned the basics. Not only am I going to give you this roadmap, but I've also curated a list of resources for each technology that will get you started learning each one of them. And I'm going to provide that to you for free. So I'm going to refer to a ton of resources throughout this video, and I have all of them consolidated into a list for you linked in the description below. Now I want to be clear though that you don't need to learn every technology out there. And the best way to pick a technology is to look at the market, the companies that you want to work for, and see what technologies they use, then learn those technologies and languages. And the great thing is once you've learned one programming language, it's pretty easy to learn another one. A quick disclaimer, in this roadmap, I'm not going to cover every technology out there. So if I leave something out, it's not because it's not good to know. There is a good use case for everything, but I'm going to cover and focus on the ones that I think would be great to know in 2023. So let's get into it. Now, before you even get started learning web development, you need to know that the best skill any developer can master is Googling. Google is a developer's best friend. When you don't know how to fix an issue or you need to learn how to accomplish a specific task, the first thing that you should do is Google it. Try to find the answer to your questions on your own. Do research. Especially when learning a new technology, the documentation for that technology will most likely answer all of your questions. Now, if you do need to reach out to the community for help, be very detailed in what your issue is and what you've already tried and what you've already searched for. Get really good at Googling. Even the most experienced developer can't remember everything. Now, when you're just getting started, the first thing that you should understand is how the internet works. You need a basic understanding of how browsers, domain names, hosting services, HTTP, HTTPS, and DNS works. Now I have a couple of great resources that will help you understand these concepts. Next, you need to set up your basic tools, your web development environment. Now, the main tools are going to be your browser, code editor, and terminal. So let's go over those. So the browsers are a very important tool for a web developer. They are how the end user will view your applications. Now, I prefer to use Chromium-based browsers as my main browser, and I actually use Microsoft Edge specifically, but Chrome and Brave are other Chromium-based browsers that are great. But when it comes to testing your websites or web apps, you need to test these in all of the major browsers to ensure that your application will work properly in all of them. Now, currently, I test every project in Chrome, Edge, Safari, and Firefox to make sure that it looks great and works on all of them. Now, your text editor is a web developer's best friend. The better you understand what it's capable of, and the more efficient and accurate and quick you'll be in writing your code. Now, my favorite code editor is VS Code or Visual Studio Code, and it's the most popular code editor for the vast majority of developers. I have a ton of resources on my YouTube channel that can help you install, configure, and become familiar with VS Code. And if you really want to become a pro in VS Code, I even have an entire course that will help you become a VS Code superhero. And then next, you'll want to get used to using the terminal or the command line. Now, some are very scared of it, but I promise it's not that bad. There are many options for terminals. Every operating system comes with a terminal. Windows comes with the command prompt and PowerShell. And you can also use Windows subsystem for Linux or WSL, which gives you a Linux shell in Windows. Now, another option, and the one that I personally use, is Git Bash. And if you're on macOS or Linux, I would recommend ZSH, and I've provided links to all of those. Now, after you get your local environment set up, it's time to start coding. Now, the first things that you need to learn are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML provides the structure of a website. CSS makes it look good, and JavaScript makes things happen. So the first thing to learn is HTML. Every web page uses HTML. It's the main building block of the web. HTML provides the structure of a website, and it's actually not a programming language, but a markup language. You'll need to learn the basic syntax, semantic HTML, forms invalidation, accessibility, SEO, and best practices. And I have a bunch of resources for you to learn all of that. Now, CSS is another important part of every website. It makes them look good by styling the HTML elements, and it adds flair with transitions and animations. Now, there is a lot to CSS, so if you prefer to focus on front-end development, it's very important that you understand CSS fully. Now, after learning the basics, you want to learn the layout features of Flexbox, CSS Grid. After that, be sure to get comfortable with responsive design, including rem units, viewport widths, fluid widths, and media queries. And then there's CSS Frameworks. Now, some people just skip over the CSS basics and go straight to a CSS framework, and that's not good. You really need to have a solid understanding of CSS before learning a CSS framework. So I wouldn't suggest looking at any CSS frameworks at this time, but they are included later on in the roadmap. And then there's JavaScript. JavaScript is the first programming language that you'll learn as a web developer. HTML is a markup language, CSS is a styling language, and JavaScript is actually a programming language. And it makes the web do things. And so you'll need to learn the basic syntax, DOM manipulation, the fetch API, JSON, and ES6+ features. So you should spend most of your time on this part. It's extremely important that you fully understand JavaScript before moving on. Now, for those who want to learn a JavaScript framework like React or Vue or Svelte, don't start learning a framework before you understand vanilla, just plain old JavaScript. These frameworks are based on JavaScript, and so you need this knowledge first. I have a ton of resources listed for you to fully learn JavaScript. Next, I'd recommend that you learn a bit more about the terminal. So as you start getting into version control, frameworks, deployments, and other tech, you'll need to use the terminal more and more. And so this is a good time to get more comfortable with the terminal. And again, there's a bunch of resources listed, linked in the description. Version control is very important to learn. Version control allows you to keep track of changes to your code base. This becomes very important as you start to work with other developers on a team. Each person is making changes to the code base, and these need to be tracked. So you should learn Git and GitHub. These allow you to keep track of changes, collaborate on projects, and are an integral part of the CI/CD pipeline. CI/CD stands for continuous integration, continuous deployment. Next, you need to understand how to set up a hosting service and deploy a basic website. The easiest way to do this is through a static host like Netlify, Vercel, Cloudflare, or even GitHub Pages. And these allow for easy deployment that can be integrated with GitHub. This way, every time you update your GitHub repo, your site will automatically rebuild and redeploy. Now, if your application requires a true backend environment, you'll want a more traditional hosting service like Heroku, Linode, or there are many others. And there's lots of resources on this as well in the link below. Now, at this point of the roadmap, you should know enough to call yourself a front-end engineer. Now, you should be able to build a basic website, deploy it, and manage it. Now let's start looking at some back-end technologies. Now, since you've already learned JavaScript, you might want to start looking into Node.js. Node.js allows us to use JavaScript on the backend server. Now, with Node.js combined with Express.js, we can define routes, build out APIs, connect to databases, and so much more. You'll also learn about package management. Node.js comes with NPM, which is Node Package Manager. Package managers allow us to easily add pre-built packages into our applications that let you accomplish various tasks without recreating the wheel every single time. Next, it's time to learn about APIs, Application Programming Interfaces. These allow you to perform some sort of query or computation on the back end and then send the results of that to the front end. A simple example is requesting data from a database. The API on the server will perform that action and then send the data to the front end. This allows us to add a layer of security to our applications. We don't want the front end to perform these actions since that would expose our database login credentials. The API allows us to do all of this behind the scenes and just send the resulting data to the user. Now you'll hear the term REST or RESTful API. Now there are other types as well like GraphQL, and I have resources on all of that linked in the description below. Just about every site has some data that it needs to keep track of. Examples are products for sale on an e-commerce website or blog posts. Now, there are many different types of databases. There are relational, document, graph, wide column, and many others. Now, a quick disclaimer, just to be completely transparent, I am a developer advocate for MongoDB. Now, that being said, I don't think that there is one technology to rule them all. There are different types of databases for a reason. Now, some are better than others depending on the use case. So I'm not going to tell you that one database is the best and that you should always only use this one type of technology. Do your own research to understand technologies so that you can pick the best ones for your specific use case. Now, relational databases are a lot like spreadsheets with tables and rows and columns. These tables link to each other using a unique identifier. Relational databases are more strict and they require you to define each table's column and type ahead of time. And so in this way, you have a predefined schema. And because of the way these databases are structured, you'll most likely want an ORM or object relational mapper to make mapping this connected data easier. This way, when queried, the database will return all of that connected data that you need. Because for each query, it has to reach out to each individual table, join the data back together, and then return the results to you. The most popular relational databases use SQL or Structured Query Language. And examples of these are MySQL, PostgreSQL, and Microsoft SQL. Now, relational databases have been around for decades, and not much has changed in them. Document databases, however, are relatively newer technology, but they bring many benefits over SQL databases. Document databases are not as strict as relational databases by default, but they can be as strict as you need, and so there's more flexibility. Document databases also use documents, which are basically structured as JSON. And since JSON is based on JavaScript, it's much easier to understand and implement into your application. And because of this, there's no need for ORMs. Now, the best example of a document database, in my opinion, is MongoDB. Now, this is the part of the roadmap where I would suggest learning a front-end JavaScript framework. But I can't emphasize enough, be sure that you know JavaScript before moving on to this step. Front-end frameworks have many advantages. You can build powerful single-page applications, keep your components organized, and easily build interactive UIs. Now, when you're working with a team, it becomes apparent how easy it is to break up an application into components for each team member to work on. Now, there are many frameworks available, but in my opinion, you should learn one of these, and these are in order of my preference. So React is the first one. React is by far my personal favorite. And it's fairly easy to learn and it has great community support. It's used in many companies and there are a lot of job openings for React developers. Now Vue is one of the easier frameworks to learn. It's awesome to work with and it also has great community support. It isn't as popular in the job market, but every year it's adopted more and more. Now Angular is a very popular framework, but I personally don't enjoy working with it. Now, I think that it's more suited to a very large application or corporations, but there are a lot of job openings for Angular developers too. Now, Svelte has gained a lot of popularity and it's very easy to learn because it just builds upon regular HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So there's no need to learn boilerplate code needed for other frameworks. If you learn React or Vue, there are a lot of other frameworks that are built on top of these frameworks. And so examples of these are Next.js and Gatsby, which are built on top of React, and Nuxt.js, which is built on top of Vue. Now you can look into one of these after learning React or Vue if you want to add more built-in functionality out of the box, like static site generation and server-side rendering. There's even a full-featured full-stack framework built on top of Svelte called Svelte Kit. It's just like Next.js is to React. Next is a great time to learn CSS frameworks. And just like with JavaScript frameworks, it's going to benefit you to know CSS before learning a CSS framework. Now, CSS frameworks just make it easier to use CSS to style your applications, but you're still using CSS. Now, the two CSS frameworks that I like to use are Tailwind CSS and Bootstrap. Now, if your site needs to keep track of user interactions like a shopping cart, or it has user accounts, you'll need to implement authentication. Now, you can go old school by using OAuth or JavaScript Web Tokens, JWTs, and you can do all that manually. But to make things easier, you could use an authentication provider, which will do all of that work for you. A great one that I like to use is Auth0, and I have some resources for you on authentication as well. Content management systems allow you to easily manage the content of your site. Now, if you are a freelancer, then you'll most definitely want a good CMS for your customers to use so that they can easily update the content of their website themselves. WordPress is probably the most popular CMS, but WordPress traditionally requires you to use their service for the backend CMS and for the front end, and so you're basically locked in. Now, in the past few years, headless CMSs have become very popular, and WordPress now has a headless option as well. This allows you to use a headless CMS for the backend, but then you can use any front-end technology that you want. And so now you're not specifically tied to a technology on the backend and the front end. Great examples of other headless CMSs are Sanity.io and Strapi. Now, at this point of the roadmap, you've learned enough front-end and back-end technologies to call yourself a full-stack developer. But the learning never stops. You have to keep up with updates and upgrades to technologies that you've learned so far, and keep your eye on new emerging technologies that could add value to current or future projects. So don't stop learning. Something that often gets overlooked is soft skills, or a better name for it is people skills, along with personal development. These are the top skills that you should invest effort in developing. Communication, teamwork, attention to detail, problem solving, work ethic, time management, adaptability, interpersonal skills, creativity, and leadership. Another huge issue that you will run into is losing motivation and imposter syndrome. You need to surround yourself with people who are supportive to you and understand that you are not alone. An amazing resource for motivation and dealing with imposter syndrome is Danny Thompson. You have to go check him out on YouTube and Twitter. Now, from this point on in the video, everything that I talk about is optional learning. There are a couple of other front-end frameworks that you might want to keep your eyes on. So Next.js is one of my personal favorites. Next.js is a full-stack framework built on top of React. It has built-in routing, image optimization, SSG, SSR, ISR, TypeScript support, and one of the coolest features is API routes. You can have your backend server API routes that utilize serverless functions right inside your front-end code base. It's really cool. Astro is another really interesting framework. With Astro, you can build static websites using existing frameworks altogether. You can incorporate React components, Vue components, Svelte components, and use them all together with Astro. It can combine and build these out into static HTML sites, and it's a very interesting approach. Now, to build upon your JavaScript toolkit, you could learn TypeScript, which is a superset of JavaScript. It allows for static typing. And I don't mean typing on the keyboard, typing of elements in your code. This helps you to catch errors and fix them before running your code. When you're using TypeScript, it actually gets compiled into regular JavaScript on build. So this is a tool that can help you write better code, and it can be used with most frameworks. Now, if you want to expand your CSS skills, you can look into CSS animations, preprocessors like Sass, and different ways to incorporate CSS into your projects like CSS modules and CSS in JS. Now, if you prefer working with backend technologies, you might want to look into learning another backend language. Now, the best way to get a high-level understanding of what these languages are capable of is by checking out the 100 seconds videos from Fireship. He has a bunch of great short explanations of each of these languages like Go, Rust, Python, Dart, PHP, Java, Kotlin, C, C#, and many others. Now, something else to look into is blockchain and crypto. Blockchain is a type of database actually, but it's not like a typical database. It stores data in blocks and then chains them together, hence the term blockchain. Now you can store any type of data in a block, but it's typically used as a ledger for transactions. Bitcoin, among many others, use blockchain in a decentralized way so that no single person has control. Decentralized blockchains are immutable, and that means that the data cannot be changed. So once a transaction is recorded, it's permanent and everyone can see it. And this makes blockchains very secure. Now, blockchains exploded in 2020, 2021. They kind of leveled off in 2022, but I don't think that they're going anywhere. And I do believe that they will continue to grow in popularity as the technology matures. I have a bunch of resources for you on this topic as well. Now, maybe you want to get into mobile development. The traditional way to build mobile applications is by using the native languages like Swift for iOS development and Java or Kotlin for Android development. But if you've learned HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can actually use these to build native mobile applications as well. There are several technologies that are popular in mobile app development. The most popular ones, I think, are React Native and Flutter. You can even use your web development skills to build cross-platform desktop applications with Electron. Electron uses JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, and is powered by Chromium and Node.js. With it, you can build desktop applications that are compatible with Mac, Windows, and Linux. Now, some popular applications that are built with Electron are VS Code or Visual Studio Code, Twitch, Slack, Figma, and Discord. AI and machine learning is widely used to imitate human intelligence and perform simple as well as complex functions like the ability to learn and analyze information, collect data, understand emotions of humans, or to solve complex business challenges and problems. And we saw over just the past few years rapid growth in machine learning platforms and applications such as GitHub Copilot and more recently ChatGPT. These are both based on OpenAI models. Now, AI is everywhere, so we should get used to it. It's not going to go away. It's also not going to take your jobs anytime soon. In fact, there is a lot of demand for new developers who can develop and improve these AI technologies. So this is definitely a field of study that you should check out. Now, remember, you don't have to learn everything that we just covered. Start back at the beginning of the video and work your way through. Use the link in the description to get all of the links to the resources mentioned. After you've learned the basics, focus on the technology used at your current job or your aspiring job. So if your current employer uses Angular, focus on Angular. If the companies that you're interviewing with use React, focus on React before your interviews. Then you can learn other languages in your spare time, if you have any. Now, if you've gotten comfortable with JavaScript and you want to learn some Python in your spare time, then do that. And don't be worried if you can't keep up with current trends and technologies. Most companies are not using the most up-to-date technologies. Now remember, learning something takes time. It takes time and patience and practice to get good at something. So be patient, take your time, never stop learning, and never give up.